Hey everybody, this is Andrea Jenson from the Cash Flow CFO, and you're listening to the Cash Flow CFO Podcast, the show that explores the financial side of running a business for people who want to maximize profitability and scale with confidence. If you want to make smart financial decisions based on data and put more of your hard-earned profits into your pocket, this is the podcast for you. This episode of the Cash Flow CFO podcast is brought to you by the Cash Flow CFO. Did you know that on average, business owners have up to 84% of their personal net worth tied up in their business? Our virtual CPAs and CFOs, as well as accounting and bookkeeping experts, empower business owners just like you to make big leaps that help them maximize profitability and scale with confidence. Visit thecashflowcfo.com for more information, and thank you for listening. Hey everyone, it's Andrea, and our guest for today is Constance Wannamaker. Constance is a dedicated bilingual immigration attorney based in El Paso, Texas, with more than 20 years of experience championing the rights of immigrants and advocating for public interest causes. As the founder of C.R. Wanamaker Law and the owner of Stern Law, along with several other related enterprises, she has established herself as a formidable entrepreneur and legal advocate committed to securing justice for underrepresented communities. Her dynamic entrepreneurial spirit extends well beyond the courtroom. In addition to her legal practice, she has successfully founded multiple businesses dedicated to legal advocacy and public service, reinforcing her status as a trusted voice and trailblazer in the community. Well, welcome, Constance. I'm so excited to have you on today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Good. Well, I know you personally, and we've been in several business groups together over the years, and I've had the opportunity to watch you just really take what you're doing and really turn it into a multi-business, multi-location, just really build this amazing empire. And so I'm really excited to talk to you and share with our listeners, kind of how you got started, where how you got to where you're at today. But before we dive into that, I'd love to, learn a little bit more about you. How did you decide law was the career path for you?
That's actually kind of an interesting story. I was always kind of a do-gooder, right? I would, in college, I volunteered at homeless shelters. I was interested in social service kind of work. I was a Spanish major. And one summer during college, I wanted to continue to use my Spanish during the summer so that I wouldn't lose it. And I got an internship, kind of a dual internship working with migrant farm workers. So half the time I worked with this ecumenical church group, visiting migrant labor camps. We would give out like health kits with soap and toothpaste and toothbrushes and stuff like that. The other half of the time I worked with a legal services organization where we did know your rights workshops, and we filed complaints against growers that were mistreating their workers and not paying them. And I saw some really terrible situations, farm workers being held really in debt peonage situations and horrible living conditions. And it kind of became clear to me, like, I could do the social service side, but I'm almost enabling the behavior of the growers, right? Because I'm letting them think they're doing such a great thing by letting the church come to visit their workers versus actually changing things fundamentally for the workers so that conditions get better and getting people out of those situations and compensated for their, lack of pay, whatever. So that's when I decided to go to law school, because I went and become a farm worker attorney, which is what I did.
I love that. I think what I like most about what you just shared is that you found the root cause and you were like, I can do these other things, but it's just covering it up versus let's go in and fix what's broken in the system. And you'll help so many more people that way versus the other way. So very cool. So fast forward, you went to law school, you started practicing law. When did you decide, I really want to open my own practice?
Mm-hmm. I decided, I opened my practice in 2019, but I decided a little bit before then. I worked for nonprofits for about 20 years. Kind of got tired of being poor. Honestly, to, keep it real, I wanted to get divorced. And when I was young and my parents got divorced, we were very poor. My dad disappeared. My mom had never worked. She had to really just scrape, we were on food stamps. I didn't want my son to be in that situation. And having, even as a 20-year career attorney, I worked at a nonprofit, right? I didn't make any money. I didn't have any savings. I had a lot of credit card debt. I had, I had student loans still. I had my son and my dogs, and I didn't want to just, move into, some little casita or some tiny apartment, right? I wanted to make sure that my son felt like wherever we went was his home, and I needed to make more money. I was also a little frustrated, with my nonprofit job. I'd been at the place I'd been at 10 years and was not even at six figures, even though I was a supervisor. I was just feeling a little underpaid. But that was really the impetus. And I started preparing at least a year, if not more, before I actually quit my job. Doing I grew up in a sales family. So going back to the old school, studying sales, the Zig Ziglar and, all the stuff that I grew up with and really just, figuring out, okay, how do I come from a public interest background, right? Like I don't have any business background. And doing a little bit more learning about really how to run a business, how to do the sales, how to do marketing, how to, do all of the things. And then I was coming back to immigration, having done something else for a while. So getting caught up again in the immigration world, doing pro bono work, volunteering at nonprofits, different trainings and things like that. So it took about, I'd say a year to a year and a half doing all the prep work before actually quitting my job and opening my doors.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I wonder, working for a nonprofit and then switching to a for-profit, I'm sure that was a big mindset shift for you, to not that anything's wrong with nonprofits. They're amazing and great and serve a great purpose, but they're run very differently than a for-profit business. So tell me a little bit about how that transition was for you.
100%. And initially I had a really difficult time charging, right? Like, because I want to help people. And then I realized I was hearing a lot of stories about why people couldn't pay me, but they were stories. They weren't necessarily the truth. And then in the immigration world, when you apply for something, depending on the type of case, sometimes you have to, if it's, say, a spouse petitioning for someone, you have to show the tax returns, right? And financials to show that you can support the person that you're petitioning for. And I'm looking at these tax returns and I'm like, this person gave me a sob story about why they couldn't pay me. And they've got way more money in the bank than I do. And it really kind of was like, gosh. And then I remember I had another client who tried to negotiate me down and then paid with an American Express. And I was like feeling a little bit taken advantage of. And then I realized, you can do good work and make money. But it was a definite mindset shift, right? Because I struggled with that at first. I think I got over it pretty quickly. But it was a very conscious mindset shift. Like, I can do good work. I deserve to get paid for it, because I am doing life-changing work.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think too, as business owners, you get to the point where you're looking more at my team, taking care of my team, paying them what they're worth. And that means I have to charge what the service that I'm delivering is worth. And I have to have the right margins in my business to be able to grow it, because the more you grow, the more you're going to be able to serve. And so it's kind of just this cycle that once you flip that switch and get into okay, it's not me personally, it's all of the impact and all of the people that I'm surrounding myself with.
Right. And I like the way you said impact, because 100% it's not, a lot of lawyers will take, okay, here's the amount of time it's taking me to do something. Here's my hourly rate, because we charge flat fees, but that's how they kind of figure that out. And I'm looking at it as, what kind of benefit are you getting out of this, right? Like, we're doing life-changing work. We're helping people gain legal status that have lived in the country for years without it. That is huge, especially right now. But, that's just a huge life-changing event. We have clients that have been in the country for 20 or 30 years without legal status. We're getting them legal status. I mean, that's a pretty big benefit, right? Like, that is a life-changing thing that we're doing. And so I look at charging not just based on the time it takes, but what they're getting for it, They're going to spend $30,000 on a car. Is that car going to get them a green card? No, and I don't even charge that much, right? So, the benefit is huge to them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what were some of those first financial components that you had to kind of piece together when you opened your own practice? You mentioned pricing, right? There's more than just the black and white, right? I always say pricing is an art and a science, and you have to look at the market. You have to look at how much it actually costs you to deliver it. What is that added value benefit that, you're also providing? What are some of the other things, maybe related to hiring staff or, deciding on where you're going to put your office and things like that?
Yeah, I was very fortunate that I had some family friends that let me use the space for free for a few months, and then kind of gradually, I'd pay them more and more as I could. We didn't even have a formal lease. And it was just me for a while. Like I said, I had probably $25,000 in credit card debt and no savings. I cashed in all my vacation time from my job, which I'd been saving because I knew this was coming. So I had about $10,000 in cash, and that was about it. But I kept everything very lean in the beginning, and it was just me. And so, I did kind of assess the market. I'm on the border and there's a ton of immigration lawyers here. Sometimes it's a little bit of a race to the bottom, right? So, because there's so many immigration lawyers here, but you have to charge enough to be able to, do the work. And what I mean by that is, and lawyers get in trouble with this all the time, if you're not charging enough, then you have to take on more clients. Then you can't do the work, you get overwhelmed, but you don't have enough money to pay people to help you because you're not charging enough. And so I was fortunate that I was, because I had been studying and reading and doing all the business books and things, that I recognized that. And I had just been studying sales, and I do come from a sales family, like all of my family is in sales. So I just put on my sales skills and, sold people on this is what you pay. I did allow some payment plans. I learned, and we do payment plans now, and now we're high volume. So that's not for cash flow purposes. It hasn't been a problem. But initially I had to be a little more careful with the payment plans. And I did get screwed a few times, right? Where I let people pay me later and never saw that money. But I remember my first hire was a part-time. I think I paid him like $10 an hour. I took advantage of free labor from the university interns, to bring people in. And then I just realized I needed some higher level help, and the mindset of, okay, it's like my first paralegal was like $50,000 a year, and I'm like having, palpitations, but you don't pay it all at once, right? And then also thinking, as shitty as it might sound, you could let him go if you have to.
Yeah.
That wasn't the plan, but that just made me feel better. And I also, for me personally, I have a pretty high risk tolerance. And I just know that everything will always work out, right? It just will, because it does. And so that helped too. But, it was scary initially. Those first few hires were very scary. And so I just really tried to keep it lean at first. And then as we grew and I felt more comfortable and we had more cases and then really, knowing that it makes me more efficient and better, right? If I hire a paralegal who can hand me a file right before I go to court, well, I can take more cases because I don't have to do all the work of the prep and all the court work, right? I just go to court, and then I've got other people doing the work, which means we have more cases coming in and more revenue. And that's really how I approached it. But it did take a little while for that first hire.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love how you kind of dipped your toe in the water and also you're doing your due diligence all along the way, right? So you're getting that education component, you're getting that in lieu of experience. And then that way you're going in and you have a much higher rate of success because of that. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big takeaway for any of our listeners that are kind of like, okay, fast forward to today. How many employees do you have?
I don't know exactly. We have multiple locations now and a large call center in Mexico. So with everyone combined, we're close to 400. Mm-hmm. In the main law firm, I think. It's between 350 and 400 for the main law firm. And then we have other entities with other employees as well.
Yeah.
this has just been since May of 2019. So it happened pretty quickly.
Yeah. Awesome. So I wanted to give our listeners a little bit of that then, and then what we're working on now. And then let's fill in the in between there. So when did you decide, okay, I figured out this one law firm. Now I'm ready to expand. What were some of those first steps that you took to start your growth trajectory?
Yeah. So I hired well in what we call the main law firm, and as I hired, then I needed to hire higher level and higher level and higher level, and I was really interested in opening other offices with immigration law. For those who don't know, it's federal law, so that means that I can practice anywhere in the United States. My license is in Texas, but I can have offices all over because you don't have to be licensed in the state where you have an office to practice purely immigration law. And so I thought, I want to expand. I was looking at the Southeast. That's where I grew up in South Carolina. And I know that there's a huge potential there. I wasn't necessarily looking in South Carolina. I was thinking more Georgia, Atlanta, that region, right? And then I just Googled. I started Googling like law firms, acquisitions, and I just kind of fell on the one that I ended up buying in Atlanta, which was a slightly different niche, which is good. It expanded our offerings and our, it's an additional revenue stream, but serving the same population. So it fits culturally and within my, bigger picture vision of helping immigrants in the United States. And so that one just kind of happened. And I tell you what, I learned a lot through that acquisition. But, alongside, and we kept that as a separate entity. But at the same time, the main law firm continued to grow and grow and grow. And we were opening offices all over the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. So what were some of those lessons that you learned with that first acquisition?
Yeah, I would have probably gotten more advice from maybe, I don't think I even involved a CPA. I was working with a broker, me, and an internal controller who didn't have any experience in mergers and acquisitions. So we lost money the first year because I didn't know what I didn't know, right? Because I didn't have the right financial advisors in place who were looking at this with me and saying not to do it, because, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm going to do what I want, but helping me recognize what's going on. So, for example, it was not until the second quarter of last year that I was really made aware that we had lost, $500,000 because I didn't have the right financial advisors in place. I didn't have a CFO. I didn't have my CPA looking at that, and I'm not a numbers person. I don't have any finance background, and I could have worked to turn it around sooner or, taken a deep dive to see what's going on. And I know with acquisitions, there's a hockey stick, right? You buy it, it goes down, and then ideally back up, right? So this is going a little too far down.
Your comfort, yes.
I was just late knowing about it, which was frustrating. So, that was a big lesson for me. Like, I thought I was buying something that was plug and play. And once we removed the owner, who the seller presented it as it runs without me. I'm barely here. That turned out not to be the case. It turned out to be, she was very controlling, ran everything very tightly. And then when you removed that element, people kind of didn't know what to do. And so I kind of was like, it's running by itself. I don't need to give it a lot of attention. That was not true. So I really learned a lot there that I needed to give it more attention, and I needed to understand the financials better. It's not that sales necessarily went down, but our expenses kind of skyrocketed as we were like, we want to add more resources so that everybody feels taken care of, assuming the sales would take off as well, and they didn't. So, we had sales this way and then expenses this way. And fortunately, we've been able to turn it around now. But it took a long time, and I had to put a lot of extra money into it. So now I know the things to look for, red flags, things to ask. I really learned a lot through this.
Start scaling with confidence today. The Cash Flow CFO is a full-service accounting and fractional CFO firm. So it goes without saying that our financial experts are phenomenal at number crunching. But more than that, they are expert communicators who will connect all those complicated financial dots in a way that just makes sense. We don't wait in the wings and check in every so often either. With our boutique approach, we position ourselves front and center, watching over every dollar that comes in and out of your business as if it was our own. So if your business is making money and you're ready to take it to the next level, but you're not sure you completely understand your numbers, and you're looking for that trusted guide to help you build a roadmap to reach your financial goals, it sounds like we would be a great fit. Visit thecashflowcfo.com and let's get started empowering you to build and scale your business the way you want to today.
Us entrepreneurs, sometimes we have to just learn by, trial and error and figuring it out. Now you're surrounded yourself with a ton of resources, the right professional, roles that are going to help guide you. But you didn't even know I didn't know I needed that, until you got in there and realized, that's why that person does this, this, and this. And so I think for our listeners, right, when we're looking at an acquisition, right, some of the big things we want to look at, and you nailed the first one, is the professionally managed or owner operator. And a lot of times too, the valuation is very different for an owner operator and a professionally managed company. And without knowing those questions to ask in that due diligence phase to uncover, is it truly professionally managed or owner operated? You run into those types of those scenarios. And we see that a ton because owner operator and professionally managed, it's open to interpretation, right, of the seller. And they're going to say, oh, sure. And especially if somebody along the way coached them and said, you'll get a higher valuation if you're professionally managed. They're like, sure, we're professionally managed, and it really isn't the case. So when we're looking at doing acquisitions, right, the due diligence, not only is it financial and legal, it's also operational. And so do you have some resources in place now? Like, what are some of the questions if you were to go back and be evaluating that opportunity? What are some of the questions you would have asked that seller?
Mm-hmm. I would have asked more about really what her day-to-day is. I would have done a little bit more digging. I just kind of took her word. I tend to be very trusting, and sometimes that, bites you in the rear. I would have done more digging into the pulling out some of the financials a little better, or I would have really gotten more financial advice, honestly. Because like I said, the controller looking at it, she wasn't the right person to be looking at it. I would have, there's some stuff I don't know that I would have ever known, honestly, going in. But if I had paid a little bit more attention after we closed, I could have handled things differently. This particular seller turned out to be a difficult person to work with. She was going to stay on, she stayed on and helped us with the transition, but she turned out to be kind of difficult to work with. And then at some point, the rest of the team came to me and said, can you get rid of her, please? Because we just can't have her around anymore. And then, some red flags, really, the managing attorney that she had in place that she said was kind of running things is amazing. I love her. She is just brilliant, but she'd only been there a year. So, and then I didn't really get the opportunity to assess her leadership skills. She's a brilliant attorney, not necessarily a strong leader, right? Or have the capacity, right? If she's doing brilliant attorney work, then does she have the time and capacity to do the leadership work that I was asking of her? So we were kind of asking a lot of one person. So really assessing, okay, what really are the roles of the people once you remove that owner operator or, the seller. I think that's important too, so that, okay, just so you're aware, right? It could still be, I would have done anyway, but I would have known that, okay, I need a really strong office manager or ops person in there, because brilliant attorney can't be brilliant attorney and be the leader of, and make sure that all the processes and systems are, followed and doing all of that. plus consultations and doing, so there's a lot of pieces and making sure, who's doing what, that you have roles defined and what you need to fill in if you're removing the person who is, maybe the owner operator.
Yeah, absolutely. And, most of the time when we're evaluating a company for an acquisition, we don't expect it, nor do we want it to stay at the level that it's at, right? We're coming in because we want to grow that company. And so looking at, if, when you're doing your projections, looking at the expanded org chart and saying, okay, yes, at this revenue level, it might be working, but let's say we add another, million, what then changes and who needs to go where and how much is that going to cost me? So you're creating these forward-looking projections that are backed up with a budget so that it's kind of that financial roadmap. It's plug and play, okay, once the sales hit this, then I go do this, this, and this. Because, in reality, when we're growing through acquisitions, you're really busy, right? There's a lot of moving pieces to keep under control. And so having all of this done in the due diligence phase before you acquire the company, then you're just off to the races. And then it's just once these metrics are the team all knows what's the plan and you're able to go so much further. So I love that. And you got to just do it. And I love that you have the growth mindset and I'm going to jump. I don't know what's on the other side, but I'm going to figure it out. That's, because a lot of times that analysis paralysis is a true thing and it holds people back from growing. And acquisitions is such an amazing way to grow. Why start something from scratch, whether it's a new revenue stream, a new location? Go out and buy something that's already working and profitable and then just make it better, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's been a conversation within my executive team now, like, well, we were talking to someone for an acquisition in LA and I don't think it's going to go through. We're going through the financials. We think he was like not honest and open necessarily with everything. So I'm not sure that I want to go through with that, right? Like work with somebody who's maybe the numbers aren't really adding up. But then there's another one in another location that I'd really like to make happen that I think we can work out a deal. But my team is like, well, we could just open an office somewhere. And we are opening offices all over the country. But the reality is that takes time too, because and acquisitions aren't overnight. But you're right. Like the one we're looking at in Colorado, we could like do it, and then we've already got a client base, already got a referral base, we've already got office, we've already got staff. We're opening an office we opened in LA and we opened in Atlanta and Houston. And, it takes months to find a space and then you got to negotiate a lease. And then it takes months to get furniture and you can't get staff until you have furniture. And,
right. Little things you don't think about, right?
Yeah. And there's, we paid month rent for 2 months with nobody there because we couldn't get furniture. We couldn't hire people until we got furniture, and it's just, and then you got to do the marketing and you got to let people know you're there. And, there's a lot of pieces going into just opening an office too. It sounds very simple, but it is kind of hard to start from scratch versus plugging into something that's already existing.
Yeah. And I think too, it's like you're already you're doing your market research because this firm wouldn't be successful if this was a bad market. Right. So that right there, when you're doing your SWOT analysis, that takes that out of the equation already. And the other thing is you're not going to go out and buy a firm that's not profitable, right? Unless you identify, oh, I can do this, this, and this. And it's very, strategic move. Most of the time, you're going to go out and buy something that's already generating a profit. So you know that the market is there. You've got the team in place. And you're adding that profit into your bottom line there because that's going to allow you to do so much more on a global level, right? Versus just outlay of cash for 12 to 18 months runway until you hit that break even point. And then it's still a slow climb back up, So anybody out there who wants to grow their business and are listening, acquisitions is a very, very smart way to do that. And I'd love to touch on the other side of this equation is the sellers. And what are you seeing in the market right now with sellers who are of or close to retirement age. And there might be some, businesses out there that are still running kind of old school ways that you can come in and modernize. And oh my gosh, yes, that's my favorite thing to do. So tell me, what are you seeing in the market when you're out looking for acquisitions?
Yeah, and it's interesting in the law firm world, it's kind of a new thing, right? Newer to most of the time. It's, you have like a solo, maybe with an associate, and he's getting to retirement age, and the associate doesn't want to take over the business, and so he's just going to shut it down, right? Or she. And but now it's becoming more common, and more lawyers are becoming aware of the fact that they can sell their firms. And so I'm seeing, that people are willing to stay on for a little bit to do a transition, and just sort of help, here's the clients, here's the client base, here's the staff and all of that. But really, sometimes it's better to just have them not stay because of that old school mentality, and they struggle a little bit with the technology, the automations. We have a whole project management team and programmers. So, we're automating things. We're using AI. We're centralizing everything. So we're doing, we do all the back office and all of the kind of lower level non-attorney work, either from El Paso or from Mexico, where we have a large team, because it's much more cost effective. And so kind of a lot of more remote stuff. So it's definitely a mindset shift on, okay, let's, one man I talked to, and we didn't end up going forward with it. But he just had everything on a spreadsheet. He didn't even have any case management software. And yeah. And so, it's exciting because, you can come in and just really quickly make some tweaks, and, takes time to do some of this stuff. Some of the stuff is very low hanging fruit, and you can go in and make changes right away and make it more profitable without even increased sales, because you can increase the efficiencies.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there's so many businesses out there right now that are exactly like this example you just gave, that are 20, 30 years in the industry, whatever industry it may be. They've built a great business reputation. They're ready for what's next in their life. And this business, the worst thing is when a business owner just closes their doors, because it hurts the community, it hurts the team, their customers, everybody. There's this big ripple effect. So for anybody out there, business owners that want to look at, acquisitions, that is the most ideal opportunity. And there's so much of it right now. This is one of the biggest transitions of wealth that's happening, in our generation right now. And it's just really exciting. Like I'm just like a kid in a candy shop with just all the opportunity and all of the different, assets. You could even pick up assets. You don't have to pick up a whole business, right? You could pick up the team. You could pick up the market, the branding, you can pick up if they have a social media group. I mean, there's just so many things you can carve out too, that it doesn't have to be all, the whole business.
And the other thing that, we're starting to look at that I haven't completely vetted out yet, but it's kind of in my, entrepreneur head, is verticals, right? Like, okay, so maybe I don't just acquire law firms, because that does have its own particularity, right? Because you have to worry about clients, malpractice insurance, and having attorneys, and having, you're taking over cases midstream, and, then you have to really, it's a more complicated analysis, because it's like, okay, how much did you get paid? And that's another thing that I learned from that first acquisition. How much did you get paid on this case? Where's the money? How much is it going to cost me to pay somebody to finish that case? Well, if she already took all that revenue as earned, then that money's coming out of my pocket to pay somebody to finish the case. We need some offsets, right? Or one thing I learned is holding back working capital, right? Which I didn't do because I didn't know. Now I do. Like if I'm putting in my own money, I shouldn't have to put my own money in to finish something that you already got paid in full for, right? So, holding back that working capital to make sure, even if it's, not all used, but having that extra funds there's extra funds there, maybe not paying the full amount or, figuring something like that out. But looking at, verticals, I started a company that is a vertical, but right now we have a contract with a BPO in Mexico at a call center. And so all of our employees are technically employees of the call center, although they just work exclusively for us. We don't really consider them contractors. We're in the process of opening our own entity in Mexico, but honestly, it's such a administrative nightmare. It occurred to me, well, we should maybe there's a call center we can buy, right? Because opening a company in another country is very complicated. It's super easy in the US, right? It is not. So it takes almost a year just to do all the paperwork and stuff. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. But then thinking about, okay, what other things can we, what other business, we're talking about our own software. Well, maybe we need to look at a small software company because we're using, 10 different things and none of them work the way we want. Exactly. So let's do our own software. Well, what do we need to do that? Maybe we buy a software company with all the people already there and then we work with them and then it's something we sell. Right. So just really thinking about different things. So it's not all necessarily immigration law firms, but what else can support that. And I heard actually Roland Frazier, I think on a podcast say, I remember I was out running and I stuck in my head, take your biggest revenue streams and turn them into profit centers. And so you can look at that, okay, not biggest revenue, biggest expenses, right? Turn them into profit centers and thinking, okay, what are my biggest expenses and how can I make that profitable? And sometimes that might be by acquiring a company that does that thing and then selling that service too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the greatest way to create your own ecosystem. It's like, when we look at customer acquisition cost and customer lifetime value, the cost to acquire a customer, if you can only do that one time and then continue to increase that at that lifetime value, you've already earned their trust providing service number one. So why not provide, they need the other services too, provide those other services. And that makes your marketing dollars go so much further. And I think a lot of business owners don't realize that. We talk a lot with our clients, like, okay, where are we cross-selling, upselling? We've already paid to get the customer. How else can we serve them? And really just squeezing as much lemon out of that, as much juice out of that lemon as possible, because they already, you've done the hard work of building that relationship and that trust. And so why not find other ways to serve them? And
right. And if you think about like areas where are we referring people out because it's something we don't do, and how many requests are we getting for this type of thing? Well, if we're getting a lot of requests for it, maybe it's something we should look at doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you go to that person you've been referring to and you say, hey, guess what? We either, find a way to work together, or I'm going to have to do it myself and I don't want it to affect your business. So let's, come up with a joint venture or, let me acquire you or whatever that might look like, right? Those are the ways that you're strategically looking at your P&L and making decisions on where do I go next. So I love that. I think that's great. Awesome. Well, this has been such a great conversation. I hope you've had a good time, Constance, sharing your amazing journey because you're so inspiring. And I think more business owners, especially women, we need to hear that it's not scary as it sounds, and it's not something that only the big corporations do. This is the most efficient and cost-effective way to scale your business other than just dumping a ton of money in your marketing. Because go out and get something that is already generating revenue, tuck it in, and you're just going to, exponentially grow that way. So,
yeah. And I do think one thing that I've learned, I've hired a lot of people. I've interviewed a lot of women. I know a lot of women business owners. Is often as women, we feel like, I can't move until I'm 100% ready or at least 90% ready, right? Like women, we always feel like, oh, I'm not qualified to do that, or I can't do that. I've interviewed amazing women that are like, you know what? I don't think I'm ready for this job yet. And I'm like, but I think you're ready for the job, Like, don't sell short. Whereas a man might have 2 out of 10 qualifications or, out of the 10 world, and they think that they can rule the world, right? Like, I think there's just a different mindset. And as women, we need to be more confident in our abilities to figure it out, and not feel like we have to have everything perfect and know everything before we take action.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because that's where you grow. You grow in that I can do the baseline, but this is a stretch, and it's like, that's where the fulfillment comes in. And that's where the greatest like satisfaction of, okay, I'm going to take this challenge. And as entrepreneurs, we do that every day. I take steps where I don't see the other side and I just go, yeah, it's going to work out. It always does. Right. And I think more, whether you're in your career or you're an entrepreneur, those are things you need to embrace the uncomfortableness. Like I feel like 80% of my entire, professional things I do every day are uncomfortable for me, right? They're a stretch. I'm not doing things that I'm like, yep, I got this nailed. I'm perfect at XYZ. I don't live in that area and I wouldn't be where I'm at now if I did. So yes.
And I really think that things aren't worth doing unless they're a little bit scary.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. I love it. Oh, good. Well, thank you so much for being on today. If any of our listeners would like to, get in touch with you, learn more about your services, how can they reach out to you?
We have, lots of presence, social media. The best way is through our website. I think we have a contact us page, with an email that goes to my team and they will forward me anything. LinkedIn, obviously I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. We're on all the social medias, mostly in Spanish, because it's obviously geared towards our clients. So,
Okay, perfect. We'll link all that in the show notes so people can reach out if they want to get in touch. And thank you so much again for sharing your journey with us and, hopefully motivating our listeners to get out there and look at acquisitions as a form of growing their businesses.
Yes. Well, it was a pleasure, Andrea. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and review, and we'll catch you on the next episode. If you're looking for more content or resources in the meantime, check out our website for information, blogs, and our I've Got a Spreadsheet for That series. That's thecashflowcfo.com. Again, thecashflowcfo.com. We can't wait to hear from you.